At my wedding, my in-laws mocked my mother in front of 204 people. Then they said to one of the guests, "That's not a mother, that's a mistake in a dress." My fiancé laughed. I didn't. I got up and called off the wedding in front of everyone. Then I did this. The next day, their world collapsed because my name is Jenna Park and I'm 32 years old. I'm standing in a room that costs more to rent for one night than the apartment my mom and I lived in for 10 years. This is my wedding reception. Everything is perfect, a flawless, shimmering mirage, which is exactly how I know it's a lie. The chandeliers hang from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, dripping a cold, expensive light onto 204 guests. The air hums with the polite murmur of old money and smells of champagne and lilies. My fiancé, Lucas Whitlock, has his hand resting on the small of my back. His touch is light, proprietary. It's supposed to feel like a promise, but in this room, under the weight of his family's expectations, it feels more like a claim. We're partners in a major merger, and I'm the asset being acquired. Across the room, I see my mother, Diana. She's an island of quiet dignity in a sea of performative wealth. Her dress is a simple, elegant column of deep blue fabric that she tailored herself. It fits her perfectly, a testament to her skill. She catches my eye and gives me a small, steady smile that says, "I'm here, I see you." Then my gaze drifts to my soon-to-be mother-in-law, Margaret Whitlock, who is watching my mom with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. It's a tight, critical little curve of the lips, a look I've come to recognize as her silent judgment. It's the same look she gave the waiter who poured the wine a little too quickly, the same look she gave me when I mentioned my degree was from a state school. It means someone or something is failing to meet the Whitlock standard. I look down at my own hands, then at my mom's. I've watched her hands my whole life. I've seen them thread a needle, knead dough, change a flat tire, and gently wipe away my tears. They are hands that build, that fix, that create. The Whitlock's hands only sign checks and grip champagne flutes. This entire venue is paneled in marble, a stone the Whitlocks adore. It's cold, hard, and unforgiving. They love things that can't be moved or changed, things designed to outlast the messy, inconvenient people who walk among them. The clinking of a spoon against a crystal glass cuts through the low chatter. Victor Whitlock, my future father-in-law and the chief executive officer of Metro Axis Developments, stands to give a toast. He's a man who moves through the world like he owns it, which in many ways he does. He sees cities not as places where people live, but as chessboards where he can arrange his expensive marble pieces. "A toast," he begins, his voice booming with practiced authority. He talks about legacy, about building things that are meant to last for generations. It's clear he's talking about his skyscrapers, not the fragile bonds of a family. Then he gestures with his glass toward my mother. "And we are so pleased to welcome Jenna's mother, Diana, into our circle, a true testament to what a person can achieve by pulling themselves up." It's coated in the thinnest veneer of a compliment, but the words are a judgment designed to highlight the distance between her world and theirs. He hands the microphone to his wife. Margaret takes it, her diamonds flashing under the cold lights. "And we are so thrilled to welcome Diana into the family," she coos, her voice dripping with a fake syrupy sweetness that makes my teeth ache. She pauses for effect, letting her eyes sweep over my mom's simple blue dress. Even if her dress looks like a lovely little mistake, the room falls silent for a heartbeat. Then, a few of their friends, the ones who understand the coded cruelty of their world, let out a few high-pitched titters of laughter. The insult hangs in the air, a deliberate, poisoned dart. I look at my mom. Her face is a perfect mask of composure, her lifetime of navigating quiet indignities serving her well. But I know her. I see the tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of pain in her eyes, the way her smile becomes just a little too fixed. She is hurt, humiliated, in front of all these people. I turn to Lucas, my heart pounding in my chest. This is the moment he proves he is my partner, my defender. I'm waiting for him to step in, to say something, anything, to shut his mother down. He just needs to speak. Instead, he laughs. It's not a big laugh, just a short, nervous bark of a sound, an exhale of allegiance. In that one simple sound, he chooses them, he sides with them. In that instant, the entire glittering illusion shatters. The chandeliers, the flowers, the 204 smiling faces, it all dissolves into a cold, hard clarity. This isn't a family I'm joining, it's a hostile takeover, and my life is the price. My future isn't a marriage, it's a lifelong negotiation where I will always be outvoted. I gently pull my back away from Lucas's hand. The absence of his touch is like dropping a heavy stone. The weight is gone. I take 2 steps forward and take the microphone from a stunned Margaret. Her fingers are limp, her condescending smile frozen on her face. The room is so quiet I can hear the fizz of the champagne in the glasses. Thank you all for coming, I say, and I'm surprised by how steady my voice is. It doesn't tremble, it's clear and sharp like a shard of broken glass. And thank you, Victor and Margaret, for the lesson. It's the most valuable gift I've received all day. I turn my head and look directly at Lucas. His nervous smile falters, confusion clouding his eyes. He still doesn't get it. We're done, I say. The words aren't a plea or a threat. They're a verdict, a final, binding judgment. And then I turn and walk. I walk down the aisle I had just walked up, away from the altar, away from the man I thought I loved. I walk past the 204 stunned faces, their mouths slightly agape, their polite smiles wiped clean. No one says a word. It's like I've pressed pause on their entire world. At the grand, ornate doors of the ballroom, my mother is there waiting for me. She doesn't ask what I'm doing. She doesn't tell me to reconsider. She just reaches out and takes my hand. Her hand is warm and strong, the hand of a woman who knows how to build things. We push the doors open and step out into the cool night air, leaving the cold marble room behind. I don't look back. The goal was supposed to be building a life with him. The obstacle was his family's suffocating influence. I just realized with chilling certainty that he wasn't the goal, he was just part of the obstacle. We end up at a 24-hour diner with cracked vinyl booths and the smell of old coffee baked into the air. It's the same place Mom and I used to come when the cupboards were bare and we needed to feel like we weren't completely adrift. I'm still in my $1,000 wedding dress, the white silk pooling around my feet on the sticky linoleum floor. People are staring, of course. A bride without a groom, sitting in a greasy spoon at midnight. I don't care. The stares of strangers are nothing compared to the cold judgment I just walked away from. We slide into a booth and order a single slice of chocolate cake to share with 2 forks. It's a ritual. We did the same thing one night years ago when a surprise bill had left us with only $68 to our name until Mom's next payday. That $4 slice of cake felt like the ultimate luxury then. Tonight, it feels like an anchor. Mom waits until I've had the first bite before she finally speaks. You did the right thing, she says, her voice soft but firm. Your strength is not in putting up with things, Jenna. It never has been. It's not enough, I say, pushing a piece of cake around my plate. Just leaving isn't enough. They can't just do that. They can't treat you like that, treat people like that, and get away with it. They think their money makes them immune to consequences. A cold, hard resolve is beginning to form in the pit of my stomach, displacing the grief. I pull out my phone and open a secure, encrypted folder. For the past 4 months, a seed of doubt about the Whitlocks had been growing in my mind. I'd started talking to 3 early investors in Metro Axis, old family friends of the Whitlocks who Victor's arrogance had pushed to the sidelines. They were unhappy, but they were trapped. Using a $2.2 million line of credit I'd secured against my own small civic tech company, LotLift, I'd been quietly buying their voting shares. It was a massive gamble. I was betting my company, my employees' futures on a suspicion. I turned the phone to my mom. I own 54% of the voting shares, Mom, as of this morning. Her eyes go wide, the fork halfway to her mouth. She understands immediately. What are you going to do? She asks, her voice barely a whisper. I look at her, at the quiet strength that has been my compass my entire life, the strength the Whitlocks tried to mock. I'm not just going to survive them, I tell her, the plan clicking into place with terrifying clarity. I'm going to surpass them. The first call I make is from the vinyl booth of the diner, my wedding dress still brushing against the floor. I call my lawyer, who I've had on standby for weeks, just in case. I tell him the deal is done. He needs to file the paperwork immediately. The transfer of the controlling interest in Metro Axis Developments is effective now. There's no more hiding, no more quiet maneuvering. The trigger has been pulled. He sounds surprised by the suddenness of it all, but he knows better than to question me. He just says he'll handle it. The second call is to Riley Shaw, my best friend and the woman who runs operations at Lot Lift. I wake her up and I feel a pang of guilt, but it's quickly replaced by the urgency of the situation. I need you, I say, my voice low. I just blew up my life and I'm about to blow up the Whitlocks. There's a moment of silence on the other end, and then Riley's voice, blessedly calm and unflappable, comes through. Okay, where are you? Are you okay? And what's the plan? I give her the short version, ending with the risk. This could get ugly, Rye. They'll come after us, after Lot Lift, our team. I don't have to finish the sentence. My 14-person team is my family. This gamble could bury them. They trust you, Jenna, she says without a moment's hesitation. We all do, just tell me what you need. The relief is so immense it almost brings me to tears. The third call is to the Metro Axis board secretary, a man who has worked for Victor for 30 years. I don't bother with pleasantries. I tell him to schedule an emergency meeting of the board for 9 a.m. He starts to sputter, asking for a reason, saying Mr. Whitlock needs to approve it. I don't need his approval, I state, my voice devoid of emotion. As the new majority shareholder, I am calling a vote. Be there? I hang up before he can argue. For the first time all day, a sense of profound calm settles over me. The grief for the future I thought I wanted is still there, a hollow ache in my chest, but now it has a purpose. It's not just pain anymore, it's fuel. I walk into the Metro Axis headquarters at 8:55 a.m. The lobby is a cathedral of marble and glass designed to make you feel small. Today, I don't. I'm not wearing a wedding dress, I'm in a simple, severe black suit. Armor. The receptionist looks up, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. She knows who I am or who I was supposed to be. She buzzes me up without a word. When I enter the boardroom, they're all there. Victor, Margaret, and Lucas. Their faces are a gallery of disbelief and fury. Victor looks like he's about to have a stroke. Margaret's face is pinched with contempt. Lucas just looks lost, a boy in a man's suit completely out of his depth. What is the meaning of this, Jenna? Victor booms, his voice echoing off the polished marble table. This is a private family matter. You have no right to bring it here. It stopped being a family matter the moment you publicly humiliated my mother, I reply, my voice even and cold. And this isn't about family. This is about business. I take my place at the head of the table, the seat that has always been Victor's. I formally announce my controlling stake, laying out the signed documents from my lawyer that confirm the share transfer. The color drains from Victor's face. He thought those old investors were loyalists bound to him by decades of history. He never imagined they could be bought. He never imagined it would be by me. I don't waste any time. I call for a vote of no confidence in the current leadership, I say, looking directly at Victor. It's a formality. My 54% carries the motion before anyone else can even speak. A stunned silence hangs in the air. My first official act is simple. I am ordering a full, independent audit of every contract from the last 36 months. Lucas finally finds his voice. He steps forward, his hands held out in a placating gesture. Jenna, please, we can talk about this. Don't do this. His voice is pleading, but his eyes are panicked. He's not worried about us. He's worried about what an audit might find. We had our chance to talk, I say, my gaze fixed on the skyline outside the window, refusing to look at him. Now we're going to look at the numbers. Victor slams his fist on the marble table, the sound cracking through the tense silence of the boardroom. This is revenge, he bellows, his face turning a blotchy red. It's petty and childish. You'll ruin this company with your little temper tantrum. I meet his furious glare with a calm I didn't know I possessed. Accountability isn't ruin, Victor, it's just new to you, I say. My voice is quiet, but it cuts through his rage. I lay out my terms clearly, leaving no room for negotiation. There will be no more backdoor approvals for projects. No more using my name or my company's work to legitimize your bids without my explicit, written consent. And you will no longer treat the communities you build in like backdrops for your press photos. Margit, who has been silent until now, lets out a derisive sneer. You have no idea how this world works, little girl, she says, her voice dripping with venom. You think you can just walk in here and change everything? I know how to build things that are honest, I reply, holding her gaze. Let's see if your company holds up to the same standard. Then I make my final move for the morning. I nod toward the door and it opens. Avery Brooks, the lead auditor I'd already vetted and hired weeks ago, walks in. She's in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that I can tell immediately makes the Whitlock's skin crawl. She is professional, precise, and completely immune to their blustering. I introduce her to the room. The Whitlocks are trapped. They can't fire her. I'm the one who hired her. They can't stop the audit. As the majority shareholder, I've ordered it. Their power in this room has evaporated. They stare at me, their expressions a mixture of hatred and shock. They finally understand. This isn't the end of a fight. It's the beginning of a war, and I just fired the first shot. Avery Brooks and her team of forensic accountants set up shop in a glass-walled conference room on the executive floor of Metro Axis. They are an island of quiet, methodical efficiency in what has become a sea of corporate panic. They move with a purpose that is unsettling to the established order, requesting access to everything: server logs, accounting software, expense reports, emails. The Metro Axis employees react in one of two ways. Most are terrified, scurrying past the conference room with their heads down. But a few, the ones who have been overlooked and undervalued by Victor for years, are secretly helpful, leaving anonymous stacks of files on the auditor's table when no one is looking. Predictably, Victor hires Colin Drake, a notoriously aggressive corporate lawyer whose picture should be in the dictionary next to the word shark. Drake's first move is to try and bog the audit down in red tape, citing proprietary business information and trade secrets to block Avery's access to key project files. I shut it down immediately. I send a company-wide email, my first as the new power broker, confirming that Avery's team has my full and unconditional authority. I state that total cooperation is not optional. It's a clear power play and it works. The flow of information resumes. Meanwhile, my own life has become a circus. Riley calls me from lot lift. Our lobby feels like a fishbowl, she says. Reporters are calling every 5 minutes. I tell her to issue a simple, boring statement. Lot lift is a separate entity. Metro Axis is undergoing a standard internal review to ensure best practices. It's bland, but it's a necessary firewall. Then there's Lucas. He calls me 17 times in a single day. I don't answer. Finally, he gives up and just shows up at my apartment building, buzzing my intercom until I have to answer or the neighbors will complain. I let him up and he stands in my doorway looking tired and lost. Jenna, I'm sorry, he says, his voice raw. I was shocked. I froze. It was a mistake. He pleads with me to call off the audit. You're tearing my family apart, he says, as if that's a new development. Your family was already torn, I tell him, my voice flat. You just built such high walls around yourselves you couldn't see the cracks. I close the door in his face. Colin Drake, the Whitlock's lawyer, wastes no time launching his counterattack. Since he can't attack the audit on its merits, the facts are the facts, he decides to attack me. He starts a vicious smear campaign, leaking a carefully crafted story to a friendly business blogger. The headline reads, "Jilted Bride's Rampage Threatens Real Estate Empire." The article paints me as emotionally unstable, a woman scorned, using her ex-fiancé's company as a tool for a vindictive rampage. They even managed to twist my success with Lot Lift into a negative, framing me as a ruthless, cold-hearted tech founder trying to destroy a beloved, legacy family business. Then comes Margot's move. She gives a tearful, exclusive interview to a glossy society magazine, complete with soft focus photos of her looking forlorn in her mansion. She talks about how her heart is broken for her poor son, Lucas, and how she just hopes I can find peace someday. It's a masterful performance of victimhood designed to paint me as the cruel aggressor. The social pressure begins to mount almost immediately. Some of my own professional contacts, people I've known for years, start to look at me differently. Their calls become less frequent. When I do see them, their smiles are strained. They don't see a corporate accountability action, they see a messy public divorce, and they want to keep their distance. Riley becomes my shield. She filters the endless stream of hateful emails and comments online, forwarding only the handful of messages from people who offer their support. "Ignore the noise, Jenna," she tells me over the phone late one night. "Focus on the facts, the truth is on your side." I have to compartmentalize to build a wall inside my own head. The personal attacks sting, of course they do. But I can't let them derail the plan. This is exactly what they want. They want to make me emotional, to make me react, to prove their narrative right. Every night my mother calls me. She never once brings up the Whitlocks or the articles or the audit. She asks if I've eaten dinner. She tells me about a funny customer at the salon. She reminds me who I am, where I come from, grounding me in a reality that has nothing to do with them. Her quiet, unwavering support is the only thing that keeps the noise at bay. While Avery's team of auditors is digging through the financials at Metro Axis, I start my own review of past projects where Metro Axis and my company, LotLift, had supposedly collaborated. That was the term Victor always used, though it usually meant they would put our name on a proposal to make it look innovative, then ignore all our actual input. My gut tells me to look at the North Bay Transit Hub, a $46 million project that Metro Axis won the bid for 6 months ago. They had listed LotLift as an advisory partner. I pull up our initial pitch deck for that project, the one we presented to them early on. In our internal files, I find a flowchart I designed myself. It's a complex, unique diagram detailing a new method for integrating community feedback into large-scale urban planning. It was a point of pride for me, a piece of work that perfectly blended my design skills with my company's civic mission. Then, with a knot of dread forming in my stomach, I opened the final submission that Metro Axis sent to the city. And there it is, my diagram. It has been lifted, pixel for pixel, from our presentation. The only change is that the small LotLift watermark in the corner has been clumsily cropped out. A wave of cold fury washes over me. They didn't just use my name for credibility, they stole my actual work. And Lucas was the project lead on that bid. This wasn't just his parents' sin, this was his. He stood on a stage and accepted an industry award for a plan that was built on my intellectual property, on my late nights and my team's hard work. It reframes everything. This wasn't just about disrespect or a lack of character, it was a pattern of professional theft. The betrayal feels suddenly deeper, sharper than him laughing at my mother. He had watched me create that work, he'd told me it was brilliant. He knew what it meant to me and he stole it anyway. Love doesn't look away when it's time to speak up, but it also doesn't steal from you and call it a partnership. The pressure is building from all sides, a tightening vice. I take a screenshot of my original diagram and the one from their winning proposal, placing them side by side. I send the image to Lucas with a single damning text message. "Was this a mistake too?" He doesn't reply with words. His response is to show up at the LotLift office, unannounced, demanding to see me. He gets past the front desk and is halfway to my office before Riley physically blocks his path. My entire team stops what they're doing, watching the tense, silent standoff. His presence here is a deliberate disruption, a tactic designed to make us look unstable and chaotic to my own employees. Riley holds her ground, telling him firmly that he needs to leave. He finally does, but not before casting a desperate, pleading look in my direction. Just as the adrenaline from that confrontation begins to fade, I get a call from Avery Brooks, the auditor. Her voice is calm, but it carries a new weight. "We're seeing a pattern," she says, getting straight to the point. "There are a lot of large payments going to vendors with no discernible business history. Specifically, I'm looking at 3 construction subcontractors that were paid for work on the waterfront revitalization project. The stakes sharpen instantly. This isn't just about stolen ideas and inflated egos anymore. This could be serious criminal fraud. The social media attacks, the legal threats against my company, the raw personal betrayal from Lucas, it's all converging into a single, overwhelming storm. My options are narrowing. Backing down is no longer possible. If I do, they won't just win, they'll bury me and everything I've built. I realize with a sickening lurch that I'm no longer entirely in control of this. The audit has its own momentum now, like a boulder I've pushed off a cliff. All I can do is see it through to the end and hope I don't get crushed in the process. I call Avery Brooks back and tell her to focus all of her team's resources on the waterfront revitalization project. It was one of Victor's proudest achievements, a signature project he'd often used in speeches as a model of a successful public-private partnership. The project had been praised in the press for coming in on budget and ahead of schedule. Now I knew why. Avery's team digs in. Within a day, they confirm my worst suspicions. The 3 subcontractors she mentioned were shell companies. They existed only on paper with addresses that led to mail-forwarding P.O. boxes. They had been incorporated just weeks before the project bids were officially submitted. The auditors uncover invoices for high-end construction materials that were never delivered, and records of payments for specialized consulting services that were completely undocumented. There were no reports, no memos, no emails, just massive checks cut to these ghost companies. The total amount of money that was funneled through these 3 fake entities comes to $3.2 million. This wasn't just a case of padding the budget to cover unexpected costs. It was a black hole, a deliberate, systematic scheme to steal public money. This was it, the first piece of hard, undeniable proof. It wasn't a matter of opinion or a messy he said, she said argument. It was clean, simple, irrefutable fraud laid out in dates and dollar amounts. Avery presents her initial findings to me in a clear, concise report. No jargon, just the facts. The Whitlocks weren't just arrogant bullies. They were common criminals stealing from the very city they claimed to have built. Armed with the preliminary report, I call another meeting with Victor and his lawyer, Colin Drake. I don't invite Lucas. This conversation is not for him. We meet in the same boardroom where I'd announced my takeover. This time, the power dynamic is different. I slide the auditor's report across the polished marble table. Victor picks it up, glances at it, and scoffs, trying to project an air of nonchalance. "Creative accounting," he says with a dismissive wave of his hand. "It's how big projects get done in this city. It's a bit complex for a little tech founder to understand." Colin Drake is more careful. He reads the names of the shell companies, and I see his expression tighten almost imperceptibly. He's smart enough to know this is very, very bad. "This is a private company matter that can be resolved internally," Drake says, his voice smooth and reasonable. "We can make restitution for any bookkeeping errors. There's no need for this to go any further. They think they can just write a check and make it go away. They think I want money. They still don't understand what this is about. You stole $3.2 million from a public project," I say, my voice level and cold. "There is no internal resolution for theft." That's when Victor finally loses his carefully controlled temper. "You will not destroy this family's name over a few misfiled invoices," he roars, leaning across the table. "We will bury you in lawsuits. We will drag your name through the mud until no one in this city will even take your call. We will destroy that pathetic little company of yours." He couldn't have made it any clearer. He just confirmed it all. They will never admit to any wrongdoing. Their only strategy is to silence the truth and crush the person who dares to speak it. I walk out of that meeting with a chilling sense of purpose. Any faint, lingering hope I had for a clean break, for a quiet resolution, is gone. They just burned that bridge for me. Trying to handle this internally to force accountability from within the company was my last hope for avoiding a public war. Now war is the only option left. I go straight back to my office at Lot Lift. Riley is waiting for me, her expression anxious. "How did it go?" she asks. "They threatened me," I say, a grim smile touching my lips. "Which means we're winning." I open my laptop and do a quick search for a name I've had tucked away for weeks. Noah Green, an investigative reporter for the City Journal. He has a reputation for being tenacious, fair, and immune to political pressure. He's my nuclear option, the one I hoped I would never have to use. I compose a short, encrypted email, my fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. "Mr. Green, I am the majority shareholder at Metro Axis Developments. I have some documents you should see regarding the waterfront revitalization project. Are you available to meet?" I reread the message once, take a deep breath, and hit send. There's no going back now. The clock isn't just ticking on the audit anymore. It's a race to see who gets to tell this story first, them with their lies and their lawyers, or me with the truth. My strategy has to change. It's no longer about a boardroom battle. It's about total, radical transparency. Let the public see what their money was really paying for. Noah Green, the reporter, responds within the hour. He wants to meet the next day. I spend the rest of the night preparing with Riley. We go over every line of Avery's preliminary report, making sure I can explain the complex web of transactions in the simplest, most direct terms. This can't be about dumping a file on his desk. It's about framing the narrative. This isn't the act of a spurned lover seeking revenge. This is a citizen, a business owner, and a taxpayer exposing public corruption. My motivation has pivoted. It began as a raw, personal need to reclaim my mother's dignity and my own. Now it's about something bigger. It's about my civic duty to the city I live in and love. The risk has grown exponentially. By going public, I'm making myself the face of this fight. I know Colin Drake will come after me with everything he has, and he won't play by any rules. Lot Lift, my company, will be caught in the crossfire. My team didn't sign up for this. I feel the heavy weight of that responsibility settling on my shoulders, but the alternative is so much worse, letting the Whitlocks get away with it. Letting them use their wealth and power to intimidate me into silence, just as they've done to countless others before me. I have to see this through. The end goal is no longer just holding them accountable within the four walls of their company. The new goal is to make sure they can never misuse the public's trust again. This isn't just about tearing them down anymore. It's about building a city where people like them can't thrive in the shadows. I meet Noah Green at a neutral, anonymous coffee shop halfway between our offices. He's younger than I'd expected, maybe in his late 20s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seem to miss nothing. He has the weary, skeptical air of someone who has heard every kind of lie imaginable. I make a strategic decision not to give him the whole messy story. I don't mention the wedding, the toast, or Lucas. I frame it purely as a new majority shareholder who discovered financial irregularities during a routine review. Keeping it professional protects me, but more importantly, it keeps the focus on the crime, not the drama. I slide a single manila folder across the table. Inside is a concise summary of the evidence related to the 3 shell companies and the $3.2 million. It's the cleanest, most undeniable part of the audit so far. He reads through the pages silently, his expression unreadable. He doesn't react, but I can see the gears turning behind his eyes as he connects the names and dates. "Why are you giving this to me?" he finally asks, looking up at me. "Why not go straight to the district attorney? They will be getting a call," I say. "But the public deserves to know how the city's preferred vendors operate. This kind of thing only happens in the dark." "It needs sunlight." He asks tough, probing questions. He wants to know my motive, why I bought the shares in the first place. He's testing me, trying to figure out if this is just another corporate power struggle where he's being used as a pawn. I'm as honest as I can be. I believe the people in charge of building our city should be held to the highest possible standard. Metro Axis failed that standard. I'm fixing it. He nods slowly, taking the file. I'll look into it, he says, making no promises. But my editor will want more than just your documents. I'll need to find a source inside the city, someone who can corroborate this on the record. As I walk out of the coffee shop, I feel a strange combination of dread and relief. The story is no longer mine to control. I've lit the fuse and now I just have to wait for the explosion. 2 days later, the first ripple appears. Noah Green is a fast worker. He starts making calls, digging around in the city's planning department. He reaches out to the office of City Commissioner Grace Howard, a sharp, no-nonsense public servant who has been in her job for 2 decades. Her department was the one that officially signed off on the waterfront project. Someone in her office, a staffer still loyal to the old guard, gets spooked and leaks to Colin Drake that a reporter from the Journal is asking pointed questions about Metro Access and the waterfront revitalization. The Whitlocks know I've gone to the press. Victor calls me, his voice a low, controlled snarl. There's no more yelling. This is colder, more dangerous. You've made a fatal mistake, he says. You will regret this for the rest of your life. The next day, they make good on his threat. They file a frivolous, multi-million-dollar lawsuit against me for breach of fiduciary duty, the legal term for accusing me of deliberately trying to harm the company I'm supposed to protect. It's a classic scare tactic designed to bleed me dry with legal fees. Then Lucas starts a barrage of texts. One moment he's begging me to stop, saying we can still fix things. The next, he's accusing me of being cruel and heartless. You're destroying my father, one text reads. My simple act of handing a file to a reporter has activated a much larger, more complex machine than I ever anticipated. I thought the fight was against the Whitlocks. I now see the battlefield is the entire city's political and media landscape, an ecosystem they have spent 50 years cultivating. Noah moves faster than I expect. Within 48 hours, he's contacted the right person at City Hall and their calls finally get through to Commissioner Grace Howard. I know Grace's name from every planning meeting I've ever sat through. She's the woman who reads every page, asks the exact question no one wants to answer, and then makes the city staff prove their math. She doesn't like surprises, she hates scandals. A day after Noah's first email, I get a call from his number. They pulled the records, he says. There's a small crack in his voice I haven't heard before. Grace's people looked. They found the shell companies on the waterfront project too. She's not going to ignore it. I can hear the relief and the caution folded together in his tone. Grace calls me later that afternoon. Her voice is steel and method. She doesn't do theater. Miss Park, she says, we've pulled the payment logs. I'm suspending further disbursements to Metro Access on all current projects pending an internal review. She doesn't ask if I'm ready for what that means. She knows. She's lived with developers for long enough to know what freezing their cash flow does. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet, it's crews that stop showing up, subcontractors who go unpaid, and a company that can't keep its lights on. It's a blunt move, it hits them where it hurts, liquidity, the blood of daily operations. Victor's voice on my phone the next hour is calm, but I can hear the strain. He snarls about sabotage and threatens retaliation, but the days of his friends covering for him are ending. Grace's suspension isn't dramatic press, it's administrative, surgical. It's the kind of thing that quietly ruins plans. Then Grace does something else. She feeds Noah permission to say she's investigating. He runs with it. The story goes live with a city source, an official voice saying payments stopped pending review. Suddenly, the audit is no longer a secret scandal, I whispered to a reporter. It's a city action. People can see the gears turning. The Whitlocks' panic becomes public. I watch the ripple spread. Vendors calling accounting, Metro Access executives canceling meetings, a nervous energy that used to belong to them now belongs to me. When the headline hits my inbox that evening, City halts payments to Metro Access amid probe, I feel something tighten and then let go. It's a point of no return. The legal threats and the smear pieces are now balanced by an official action. I can't put the audit back in the box. The city has seen the light at least enough to stop the flow of money, and that gives the audit room to breathe. For the first time since the diner, it feels like the fight might be winnable on a civic level, not just a personal one. The article goes up and my phone lights up. My team at Lot Lift gathers around my desk, faces pale and fierce in equal measure. I call an all-hands that afternoon and make a decision I don't take lightly: transparency. I lay out everything I can without releasing the report itself, what we've found so far, what the city's suspension means, the practical implications for ongoing Metro Access work. I don't sugarcoat it. We could lose clients. We could lose payroll, I tell them. Or we could be the company that refuses to look away. I know what I risked when I bought those shares. You didn't sign up for this, I get that. If you want out, I'll understand. Riley is the first to speak. She stands up like she's been rehearsing, but I can tell the fatigue is already under her eyes. We're with you, Jenna, she says, and it's more than a line. She's saying she believes the city warrants fighting for. Others around the room nod. One of our junior designers wipes his face with his sleeve and asks quietly, "Are we sure we won't get crushed?" I answer in the only way I know how, with truth and a plan. We go through the cash reserves, the runway number, what can be cut without gutting the mission. I'm honest about the $2 million line I used, about what we can absorb and what would force layoffs. I see the math in their faces and know every person is recalculating their life. Mom calls that night. She doesn't ask about headlines or the court of public opinion. She asks if I've eaten, if I'm sleeping. Her voice steadies me. You did what you had to do, she says. You stood up. It's not political analysis, it's the small, necessary bridge home that keeps me anchored. I tell her goodnight, feeling a strange mix of dread and resolve. We're past the point where I can walk this back. The choice is irreversible now. I'll either see this through to making things right or lose everything trying. They don't wait to strike. Within 48 hours of the city story, Colin Drake stages the scene he's best at. A public counterattack meant to make people forget the facts and focus on the person. He chooses a marble stairway in front of Metro Access headquarters, and he's flanked by Victor and Margit, their faces painted with wounded dignity. He speaks in clipped, practiced sentences, the kind that sound like justice but are all theater. Miss Park's actions, he intones, are the result of personal vendetta, not corporate governance. He calls her behavior reckless and malicious in a voice that wants to sound pained on behalf of a community. He does not, of course, mention the shell companies or the $3.2 million. Why would he when he can focus the audience on me? He announces they are filing a lawsuit alleging that my moves are designed to harm Metro Access. He frames Lot Lift as a co-conspirator, a small company that took advantage of a boardroom drama. It's never about the money they stole, it's about me. He puts my name in the center of the narrative, vindictive, unstable, dangerous. Reporters hungry for a headline lap it up, and the picture the news outlets use is a close-up of me, mid-protest at the wedding, face hard with decision. They're trying to remake the story into a personal meltdown rather than a public scandal. The legal paper is a blunt instrument meant to intimidate. Drake knows the path he's chosen, make the fight so expensive and noisy that I either back down or break. He's counting on people's willingness to avoid controversy, on boards and clients fleeing a storm. He's also counting on an old playbook. If you make the woman at the center messy enough, people forget the wrongdoing that made her mess necessary. Within hours of the press conference, the first cracks appear. My inbox fills with curt, uneasy emails from clients who want to reassess, the euphemism for distance. One client says their board is uncomfortable about public associations while litigation is pending. The Whitlock social machine is doing what it does best, turning power into a story that favors them. The goal is clear: muddy the water so the stench is mutual and no one looks too closely at the source. The hit lands hardest at Lot Lift. Our largest client, a nonprofit that runs affordable housing projects across the city, has been with us for 2 years. We help them map neighborhood needs, prioritize units, and find local contractors. Their board calls an emergency meeting. The language is cautious and careful. We need to shield our beneficiaries from any risk. They decide to pause our current contract while they assess exposure. 30% of our quarterly revenue disappears overnight. There's a physical drop in the office that feels like the air being sucked out of a room. Phones ring with worried vendors, minor partners call to double-check their commitments, and one of our lenders asks for an updated projection. Riley turns into a machine, triaging client concerns and trying to reassure staff, but I see the lines of exhaustion around her mouth. She's been the mortar holding this company together, and now she's working 18-hour days to keep the cracks from opening. I call a smaller meeting and lay out the numbers again: what cash we have in the bank, what we can defer, what we simply can't afford to lose. I promise I won't let anyone here starve. It's a promise that tastes expensive to make. People ask practical questions about payroll, health benefits, rent. I answer as honestly as I can, but honesty doesn't fix rent. The dread is real in the room, the kind that makes jokes feel wrong and makes empathy brittle. Photographers start staking out our building. A freelance journalist tries to get a comment from a junior designer on the street. Riley stations herself at the front desk like a gatekeeper. "We'll keep the team safe," she tells me, and I want to believe her with every bone. But she's exhausted, and the strain shows when she drops her head into her hands for half a second in my office. I make a decision to protect the most vulnerable. We're going to move some of the less time-sensitive work remote, defer non-essential spending, and ask our smaller clients to let us help them in ways that don't require upfront billing. That night, Mom brings over soup. She refuses to be part of the spectacle. She sits at my kitchen table and hands me a mug like she's serving a child, but there's steel in her eyes. "You didn't ask for any of this, Jenna," she says, and I laugh because she's right. "But you did what had to be done." Her voice is small but fierce. In the quiet of my apartment, with the newsroom lights blinking red on my phone and a dozen worst-case scenarios running through my head, I let myself accept that I'm not alone. Not everyone can be shut down with a press release and a threat. Some people, like Mom and Riley and a few stubborn clients, are staying. That fact, fragile as it is, feels like momentum. The next thing I knew, the Whitlocks turned their machine toward the one person who had given the audit real power, Commissioner Grace Howard. They didn't fire a single public statement about her yet. They didn't need to. They started a quiet campaign: friendly lobbyists, gentle-sounding op-eds, and a flood of emails to city council members asking why she was risking jobs and projects by freezing Metro Access payments. It was the kind of pressure that looks like concern for the public but smells like panic. Grace called me because she wanted to be candid. Her voice on the phone was the same no-nonsense tone I'd heard at hearings, but there was a thread of exhaustion under it I hadn't expected. "You started a fire, Miss Park," she said, and the words were simple and sharp. "My people pulled the files. They found the same companies you did, but my office is getting hammered by people who want those payments turned back on. My career is on the line here." I could hear the background noise of her office phones, a distant argument about a budget, things I had never wanted to be part of. "Grace," I said, keeping my voice low, "you did the right thing. Those payments were wrong. The city needs to know." "I know what you believe," she replied. "And I believe in accountability, but politics is messy. People who used to shake my hand now say they're worried about jobs. I'm a guardian of the public trust, but I'm also a politician. If I get dragged down, the investigations stop. You need more than one project to prove this isn't a one-off. If it looks like you're just targeting one family, they'll paint you as petty." It felt like a small, practical lecture. She wasn't asking me to stop. She was telling me the limits of what she could do without a rock-solid, undeniable pattern of wrongdoing. "I'll get you that," I said. "If you need more evidence, we'll give it to you." She paused. "People will ask how involved you are. They'll ask why you bought control. You need to be ready for that." Her voice softened a fraction. "I'm not abandoning the investigation. I'm just telling you I can't be your public face if it will bury my office. Don't make this personal for me." When we hung up, I felt that raw, sinking kind of disappointment I had only known in private fights. Grace had been a lever I hoped to pull, someone inside who would make a small administrative move become real consequence. Now she was a person with a job and a life and a reputation. Her distance was practical, not betrayal, but it still felt like losing a friend in a war. The Whitlocks had yanked the fight into a wider arena, one where people protect their own skin first. They didn't stop at politics. Margaret found my mother. She didn't send wine to the salon. She didn't write a passive-aggressive note. She walked in like she owned the room, all polished shoes and soft apologies, and made a show of concern for the neighborhood. Her voice was syrupy, the kind of sweetness that bites. She called my mother's work charming and then quietly suggested that perhaps I had become too ambitious, that people like us sometimes go too far when they think they're right. Then she went louder. She gathered a few of my mother's regulars into a small circle and said pointedly that having a daughter who drags a family into the press was shameful. She hinted carefully at the idea that maybe I was using family connections to gain attention. The insinuation was simple: maybe Jenna Park was profiting from her daughter's actions. The salon smelled like hairspray and shampoo and cheap perfume. Those scents stayed with my mother all week. Mom called me that night, and I could hear it immediately in her breathing. It was the sound of someone holding back tears and failing. She was very cruel, Jenna," she whispered. "She said things about you, about me." People stared. I felt like a museum piece. I could hear the taste of ice in my mouth, the adrenaline that changes a person's voice into a stranger. I told Mom to sit down, to breathe, to not let them see her hurt. I told her I would handle it. I lied through my teeth to keep her calm. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen with the phone still warm in my hand and felt a coldness ease into the place where the anger had been. They thought picking at Mom would break me. They were wrong. They had turned the fight from corporate to personal, but they had also made it about the one thing that would never be negotiable for me: my mother's dignity. Avery came to my office with the audit bound in a heavy gray binder, the way a surgeon brings in a chart. She set it down on my desk like a small weight that somehow felt like a promise. The cover had a plain label: Independent Review. No flashy headings, no puffed-up language, just the truth organized so people could follow it. She walked me through it in her careful, patient way, pointing to pages and explaining plainly. The waterfront project was the start, but it wasn't the end of the thread. There were padded budgets across several projects, numbers added here and there until the totals looked huge. There were payments to companies that had no employees, no addresses that led to real warehouses, only mailboxes. There were consulting fees paid for work with no reports, no emails, no deliverables, just checks. She didn't hide the worst detail. "We've identified more than $15 million in questionable payments over the last 3 years, she said. She didn't use words that made things smaller. She said what it was. Money that should have been for parks, buses, and sidewalks. Instead, it had been shifted into private pockets and into projects that existed more on paper than on the ground. She showed me line after line. Invoice numbers, dates, bank descriptions, plain, boring things that add up to a pattern so ugly it looked deliberate. I felt the room tilt as I read. The binder had charts, but Avery also left space for the human details: the trips, the expensive dinners, the invoices for items that weren't delivered. There were notes about expense reports that included personal travel cloaked as client meetings. The sum total was more than I had hoped for and worse than I had feared. It was a systematic way of turning public work into private profit. Avery's face didn't show triumph. She looked tired but resolute. "This isn't sloppy accounting," she said. "It's consistent and intentional. Someone organized this." Her voice was quiet, but I heard the meaning loud and clear. This was a plan, not an accident. That night I took the binder home and sat up until 3 in the morning with the city skyline like a black toothy line beyond my window. I read everything twice. The report felt like a dense forest of paperwork, and I waded through it leaf by leaf. Somewhere in the appendices, between a payment schedule and a list of vendor contacts, I found a stack of authorization forms. The forms were dull, beige things that would have been forgettable if not for the fact that one of them had a signature on the line where it mattered most. It was the signature that authorized the final big payment to one of the shell companies, the last $800,000 drawdown. My hands went cold as I saw the looping flourishes and the way the letters connected. I recognized it. I pulled out a photograph of a birthday card from our first year together, and there it was, the same curl on the capital, the same hesitant tail on the last letter. I dug deeper, found a scanned lease agreement with his name, and there it was again, the same shorthand he used when he thought no one would look too closely. Lucas, not Victor, not a proxy, not an overworked administrator. His signature was on the line. My throat closed. I had been telling myself that maybe Lucas didn't know, that maybe he had been kept in the dark by a father who treated his family like a boardroom. Maybe I had wanted to believe he was weak, not complicit. Seeing his autograph in black ink on a document that funneled public money into a hollow company removed every last tiny excuse. I sat back and let the realization move through me like ice. It wasn't just his laughter at the wedding, not just the way he chose his mother's side in front of friends. He had signed a check. He had made a decision. He'd been part of it. Something inside me reconfigured. All the private tenderness I had once felt toward him, toward who I wanted him to be, fell away like clothes left on a chair. The person I had loved had been a careful actor, and my role in his play was to be the trophy. He had used my trust and my name as shields for his family's siphoning. The personal wound, him laughing at Mom, had been proof. The signature was conviction. I put the papers down and felt a kind of awful clarity settle over me. There would be no private reconciliation, no quiet forgiveness, no bargaining. He'd chosen. He wasn't a casualty of family pressure. He was a decision maker, and that decision had a cost that went beyond me. I got up, walked to the window, and watched the city lights blink like indifferent stars. The fight had moved from neighborhood fights and dinner table cruelties to the place where institutions bent to the will of people with money. It was uglier than I had imagined, and it demanded more of me than I'd thought I'd give. For a long, stupid moment after I saw Lucas's signature, I wanted to call him and throw the papers at his feet and ask him why. I wanted to watch him try to lie his way out of ink. I wanted to see him sweat in a way he'd never seen anyone else sweat. But the clearer the evidence became, the less I wanted to hear his excuses. The private part of me that had kept him in the story for as long as I did, hoping he would grow, hoping love could fix things, died on that page. It felt like the last safe option had been quietly carried out the back door while I was distracted by nicer things. That small hope that he was just lost in his father's shadow, that he would choose me when it came down to it, was gone. I'd been bargaining with a man who'd already decided which side he was on. The signature turned every half-remembered apology into proof of intent. It wasn't some passive, inherited silence. It was a choice signature in black ink. He had signed away his claim to any moral high ground. There was a new, awful neatness to it. The personal and the public clicked together like two teeth. It meant I couldn't protect him anymore. It meant that any idea of sparing him was actually sparing an accomplice. That realization did something strange to me. It cleared the static in my head. I could feel myself harden around the center where I'd been soft. For months, my anger had been private and raw. Now it felt like a tool, something I could use with purpose. I thought about the wedding, about the laugh that decided everything, and how for a while I had told myself it was a moment of cowardice. Maybe Lucas had frozen. Maybe he'd been a boy who didn't know how to be brave in front of his parents. That was the story I had told myself to keep the memory from hurting even worse. The signature changed the story. The laugh was not an accident. It was part of a pattern that began with jokes and escalated into theft. He wasn't collateral damage, he was an architect of their theft. I slept badly that night, not from grief but from planning. When I woke, the map on my desk felt less like a record and more like a weapon. You can't unsee a thing once you know it. The last safe option was removed, and with it any reason to be merciful. I wasn't done, and I wasn't going to be gentle. This was no longer about humiliation or even about the family name on a building. This was about the people who'd been shortchanged, neighbors who never got sidewalks, parks with promises but no benches, buses that ran without the stops Metro Axis had promised. Lucas had helped sign those promises away. There was no middle path left. They upped the pressure the very next morning. Colin Drake's motion hit my inbox before I'd finished my coffee. They wanted the court to freeze my voting shares and to keep me off the board until the case could be decided. They said my actions were causing irreparable harm to the company and to jobs, and the language was designed to sound urgent and reasonable. It wasn't. It was a move to remove the one person with the power to finish the audit and make the truth visible. If they succeeded, the 200-page report would be buried under delay and legal fees until everyone forgot why it mattered. I called Riley and Noah at once. Riley answered with a rasp that told me she hadn't slept either. Noah picked up from his car, his voice clipped and efficient. We met in a small conference room with a cheap table and a flickering fluorescent light, practical, anonymous. I told them what I'd found and what they were trying to do. Riley tapped her pen like a metronome, going through contingencies. Noah asked the right questions, timing, witnesses, what we could make public without breaking the law. He was already thinking 3 moves ahead, mapping out how to hold the attention of the public long enough for real damage to be done to the Whitlock's credibility. We made the decision then, together and brutal in its clarity. We wouldn't leak small bits or play coy. We were going to present the work the way it deserved to be shown, in full and in plain terms. I would use LotLift's data software, the thing they tried to take from us, to make the audit readable and human. Numbers on a spreadsheet had no color. A map with clear markers of missing deliverables did. We would hold a public press conference, publish a summary the city could understand, and make every document available to anyone who wanted to read it after the emergency court order expired. And we would invite the Whitlocks. That was the hard part. I wanted them in the room when the facts landed. I wanted Victor and Margit and Lucas to hear people talk about the things they stole: benches, playground equipment, community centers, while a camera stayed on them. If they were going to try to freeze the truth under a pile of legal papers, then let the truth be a spectacle when the time came. Noah agreed to the timing. Riley arranged logistics. I booked a neutral auditorium and started working with our designers to turn the audit into a story people could follow. It was all or nothing. If we failed, we'd look like a mess and they'd bury us. If we succeeded, we would change the conversation and maybe, finally, change the city. 48 hours later, we were in court. Colin Drake was wearing the same expression he'd used on the stairway outside Metro Axis. Practiced, slightly bored, and sure of the outcome. His witnesses were set, and he spoke like a man who wrote the rules. He told the judge that I was unstable, that I went from bride to boardroom in a reckless streak. He described me as someone who had bought power to hurt a family and a business. The words were crafted to sound like they were protecting the community. They weren't. They were a play to take away my megaphone. My lawyer stood up for me with a kind of quiet stubbornness I admired. He said I had every right to investigate and to use my shareholder powers. He said the audit was in the company's long-term interest. He didn't get theatrical. He stuck to facts. The judge listened with a face shaped by years of running a docket and knowing which fights were theater and which were real. In the end, the judge did something that felt small and enormous at once. He didn't take everything away from me, but he didn't let me make my case public that day either. He issued a temporary order that said I couldn't publish any company documents for the next 72 hours while he considered the full request. It wasn't a full victory for them, but it was enough to stop the press conference we had planned for the next morning. The timing was cruel. 72 hours is a long time in a breaking news cycle. It was exactly the kind of delay that could turn a roar into a whisper. When we left the courtroom, Colin Drake smiled that slow, social smile that read like triumph. He mouthed the word checkmate when he passed me in the hall. It was petty and childish, and it landed like a punch. The temporary order felt to me like a gag tightened around my mouth. I had the evidence, and I had the public on the brink of understanding, and now paper stopped my voice. It was a legal pause, but for my team it was a potentially fatal one. I walked back to lot lift under a sky that looked too clear for what I'd just lost. The office felt dimmer than it had that morning. The staff looked up from their desks like a family hearing a distant thunderclap. I put the audit binder on my desk in full view because hiding it would have felt like letting them win. Avery's notes lay beside it like a map to an enemy. For the first time since I had bought the shares, the weight of what I'd done settled down on me in a way that wasn't righteous or clean. It was heavy and complicated. The thing that cut the deepest wasn't the judge or the lawyers or even the paused press conference. It was a casual comment overheard in the hallway. One of my junior designers, a kid with coffee under his eyes and a promising portfolio, leaned toward a coworker and said, "Maybe she went too far. Maybe this will ruin us." The words were small and unassuming, the kind that don't usually wound. But they landed like a physical thing against a sore spot I've carried all my life. That I'm difficult, that asking for too much makes problems for everyone else. For a breath I believed it. Maybe I had been reckless. Maybe my need to punish had turned into stubbornness that would make people suffer. The doubt is a slow, corrosive thing. It eats at your resolve until you can't tell if you're brave or foolish. I sat alone in my office, fingers pressed to the edges of the binder, and felt the weight of all the faces who depended on this company, the payrolls, the benefits, the dreams people counted on me for. Riley tried to talk me through it, but my head was a muddle of legal deadlines and the memory of Mom sewing late at night, making something beautiful out of little. The core wound, the one Margaret had targeted with her barbed words in the salon, opened again, not because of the insult, but because of the fear that my decisions could hurt the people I loved. I have spent my life making sure we had enough, that Mom never worried about rent or late bills. The thought that my choices might imperil the stability we'd clawed to find was almost unbearable. Mom called that evening. Her voice was steady in a way that made me want to cry and be fierce at the same time. "You don't get to choose easy, Jenna," she said. "You choose right." It was a small, blunt thing, but it landed with the force of a foundation bolt. In the quiet that followed, with the binder like a sleeping animal on my desk and the temporary order ticking down the hours until it might be lifted or might be extended, I felt the choice settle in me again. The core wound ached, but it didn't undo me, it sharpened me. Lucas chose his moment with the kind of cowardice that feels surgical. The text he sent wasn't begging, it was a soft threat wrapped in concern. I heard what happened in court. "It didn't have to be this way, Jenna. There's still time to stop this. Think about your employees. Don't let your pride hurt them anymore." He used the word pride like a scalpel, aiming it at the part of me that had always believed responsibility outweighed impulse. For a second, his message landed exactly where he hoped, right where I kept the worry for everyone else's rent and health care and mortgages. I felt the tug, the heavy human part that thinks maybe the right thing is also the selfish thing to avoid hurting others. Then I looked across the room at the audit binder on my desk, at the printed invoices Avery had flagged, and I felt nothing but a cold clarity. He was trying to use my compassion as leverage, the same way his father used favors and friendly smiles to get work done. He wanted me to fold so the system could keep functioning the way it always had, quietly, behind closed doors, with other people's needs paid in promises, not outcomes. I turned my phone face down and then off because even the vibration felt like a betrayal. The office hummed with a thin, brittle energy. Photographers were still camped outside in the streetlights, and someone had posted a blurry photo of me from the courthouse with a caption that read, "Bride turned bully." It was meant to sting, to make me small in public. Inside, I felt very large and very lonely. There was no hero in scenes like this, just lists and deadlines and the constant smell of cheap coffee from the break room. I walked to the window and watched the city that Metroaxis had built in pieces, one gleaming tower at a time, each one a testament to permanence. Marble lobbies, brass plaques, ribbon-cutting photos. They looked like monuments to people who had never had to fear a late rent notice. The skyline felt like an accusation. For the first time in my life, I understood the expensive geometry of fear. How power arranges a city so that it speaks to the people who already own it and ignores everyone else. Then Mom called. Her voice was the small, steady thing that has always pulled me back when everything else threatens to unravel. She didn't ask for details, she didn't demand explanations or plead with me to be careful. She asked if I'd eaten if I had sat down that day. "You don't get to choose easy, Jenna," she said in that plain way she always has. "You choose right?" It wasn't an order, it was a furnace in a sentence. I let the heat settle into me, and for the first time that week I stopped feeling like the world had cornered me. I felt the corner turn into a vantage point. That night, after the office lights went down and the city grew quieter, I went home and found Mom waiting at the table with a brown paper bag of groceries. She had bought soup and bread and 2 tired apples. She moved through the kitchen like she had a map of every bad thing that could happen and every small comfort that might help. She put on the kettle, and the rhythm of her hands, the same hands that had tailored a dress and swept floors and held money tight, settled something inside me. She told the story about the music program at my school, the one they cut, and how I'd stood at a small podium and read a petition with my voice trembling. When the board didn't listen, I paid for lessons out of babysitting money. "You didn't win the war," she said, "but you gave someone a song." Her story was not strategy, it was an ethic. It was the idea that even when the big table favors the rich, you can build small places of dignity. She looked at me with the quiet faith she'd always had and said, "You have the facts, Jenna, you have the proof. You don't have to show them the binder to tell the truth. You can tell it plain." That was the fragile possibility. The court could gag the documents, but it couldn't gag my voice. The judge could make us wait 72 hours, but he couldn't erase the facts from my head or the city's memory. I slept poorly, but not like someone defeated. I slept like someone quietly making a plan. The order felt like a temporary pause, not an end. The press conference we'd booked the next day would have to be about the story, about the people who lived with the consequences of Metro Access's choices. We would honor the judge's order, but we wouldn't let the law be used as a shield against truth. There was a difference between being silenced and being clever with how you spoke. The auditorium felt like a good choice because it wasn't a fancy room and it wasn't a boardroom. It was neutral, public, and had chairs that scraped against the floor without ceremony. The crowd the afternoon of the conference was larger than I'd hoped. Reporters from the City Journal and a couple of television vans filled the front rows. Noah Green sat with a notebook open, eyes alert and patient. Commissioner Grace Howard was at the back, an expression like someone who had seen a lot and would see a lot more. To my surprise and not to my comfort, Victor, Margit, and Lucas walked in together with Colin Drake in their wake. They took their seats in the front row with the practiced posture of people used to grandstanding on demand. Their faces were controlled, like a stage set waiting for a storm. I wanted them to feel the eyes on them, to be watched by the same city they'd been helped to build, and to see what was left when you stripped away the marble veneer. Riley was by the door, coordinating volunteers and making sure the microphone didn't feedback. She had sleeping bags under her eyes, but a look of grim satisfaction, the kind of woman who'd slept in conference rooms and planned for power outages. Mom sat in the audience like a quiet island. She wore the blue dress she'd tailored years ago, and I could see the thread-restored places, the same seams she'd mended after countless Thursday nights. Her hands rested in her lap, steady as ever. Seeing her there made the whole thing feel less like a hunt and more like an answer. I walked to the podium without notes and without the audit binder, in a neat, deliberate gesture. I did not want anyone to think I'd sneaked papers in. On the blank screen behind me, LotLift's data visualization program came up, not the report, not the detailed files, simply a map of the city with a few bright, honest markers. The waterfront, the transit hub, neighborhoods with fewer benches than planned. Simple dots, simple truths. My voice did not shake more than once. "Good morning," I said. 2 days ago, a judge ordered me not to share a 200-page audit report on Metro Access developments. I will honor that order. I am not here to give you a document. I am here to tell you a story. Colin Drake moved like a coiled animal at the edge of his seat, ready to pounce, but the room held its attention. I could hear the soft rustle of cameras and the far, polite cough of someone who thought the day might still be a spectacle. "This is a story about a waterfront park," I said plainly. "It's about benches that were paid for but never built. It's about a budget padded by $3.2 million and funneled to companies that exist only on paper. It's about a transit hub design that was lifted from a small firm that trusted them." I clicked the remote and the map highlighted the waterfront marker, then split the screen with a simple timeline of payments, stripped of legalese and technical terms. The numbers were not poetic, they were factual. I used words anyone could understand: checks, invoices, missing deliveries. I described P.O. boxes as mailboxes that hide people and consulting fees that had no meetings attached. I told them about the difference between things that are built to be beautiful for photographs and things that are built to be used. Some people build with marble to create a legacy, I told the room and let my eyes rest for a heartbeat on the Whitlocks. Others build with their hands to create a life. I mentioned Mom, the hands that fixed my school uniform and sewed her own dress, and how those hands taught me what real value looks like: usefulness, honesty, care. The crowd shifted. It was less about the drama of a broken engagement and more about the daily indignity of promises broken. Colin Drake stood, red in the face. "This is slander," he shouted. "She has no proof." His voice was loud but thin at the edges. I had expected that. He wanted to make the people hear anger instead of facts. I stayed calm because when people are angry, they have to fill the silence. My silence was intentional. "I have facts," I said. "I have dates, invoice numbers, bank entries. I could read them all aloud, but that would be a parade of numbers without meaning. Instead, I'll give you the story they tell." I moved through the map, clicking on places where benches were promised but never installed, where children had fewer playgrounds than the brochures promised. I described how community meetings had been staged for photographs, how contractors listed as working had no crews on site when my team visited. Then I turned the screen and without revealing the audit, I described a signature, how a hand that once signed a birthday card also signed off on a large final payment to a company with no address. I didn't say the name at first. I let the room imagine any executive. I described the way signatures have a rhythm, a repetition you can check against other papers. I described the feeling of opening a file late at night and seeing the same curl you recognized from a lease. It was clinical, but it landed like a stone in a quiet pool. Victor rose, voice boiling with that particular family rage. "You are destroying jobs," he barked. "You are attacking a family business that built this city." The cameras found him like moths to flame. He wanted it to be about him, about legacy, about lineage. He wanted to make the audience forget the missing benches and the hollow invoices. I looked at him and then across the room to where Lucas sat, face pale under the auditorium lights. "This is not about destroying jobs," I said. "It's about whether public money was used for public good. It's about whether promises made to this city's residents were actually kept. The evidence shows they were not. If we bury that evidence in delay and noise, nothing will change." I let the pause sit long enough for the air to cool. Then, in a voice steady as any public servant's should be, I laid out the next steps. As majority shareholder, I will be nominating an independent board to review all Metro Access practices. I will also be turning everything we have to the district attorney's office. The judge's order ends soon. When it does, I will make the full report available. I am not asking for revenge. I am asking for accountability. The room exploded, not with applause, though some of that came too, but with questions flying and cameras refocusing. Reporters shouted for specifics, for dates and names, for the audit itself. The Whitlocks sat like statues, their public composure cracking into something sharp and hollow. Colin Drake shouted that I would be sued. Victor tried to reclaim the moral high ground. Lucas did not stand. He sat and watched the watchers. I had not come to make them suffer alone. I had come so the city could see, so the people who had been promised parks and safe streets would know someone had noticed when those promises were not kept. The decisive moment wasn't that they were exposed. It was that they were exposed in a public room with people who could ask questions, follow up, and, crucially, demand answers. For the first time in a long while, the city had a chance to push back against the marble. It's been 3 months and the dust has settled into a new kind of quiet. Metro Axis is under a state investigation that feels less like a rumor and more like a reckoning. Victor resigned before the board could finish pretending, and the independent directors I pushed in are methodically cleaning house. Old vendors are being reconsidered, contracts are being rescoped, and the names carved into marble now sound like a warning to anyone who thinks power is a free pass. The company's stock is a shadow of itself. Investors who once chased glossy renderings have moved on. Lucas disappeared after the press conference, moved out of state, I heard, and his absence is a small, private relief. Lift, the little company that could have folded under the weight of this fight, has found new footing. The publicity that was supposed to kill us did the opposite. Clients who wanted honest work reached out. Our calendar is busy again, not with ribbon cuttings for show, but with real community meetings and projects that matter. The defamation case they brought against me was dropped when the facts did the talking. It wasn't vindication in any clean sense, it was the practical end to a tactic meant to scare us into silence. The new equilibrium is quieter than the chaos, but steadier. There are new checks in place at the city. There are fewer smiling speeches and more receipts. I lost things, privacy, a future I had pictured, but the city has a better chance now than it did before. That's the balance I chose, and I live in it. The cost of this victory is visible in small, stubborn ways. I still flinch at sudden loud noises. I guard my phone like a small animal, and there are days when I miss not having to explain myself to people who think power excuses dishonesty. I lost a life I had imagined with someone I once trusted, and that loss is a private dull ache that doesn't go away with headlines or settlements. I traded some comfort and a quiet future for something messier, but I hope truer. But standing here now in a sunlit school gym with folding chairs and hand-drawn signs on the walls, I see what I gained. The Diana Fund founders' table is next to ours. Mom sits in the front row looking like she always has, steady, kind, and proud in that blue dress she fixed a seam on last week. 10 girls from neighborhood public schools sit on the front bench, each with a small toolkit and a sketchbook. Their faces are bright and serious, and they pass their toolkits around like treasure. I tell them a simple thing I believe: that work should be honest, useful, and visible. I talk about Mom's hands, how they made things from little, how they showed me what real building means. I hand each girl a small stipend check and a list of training programs and say, plainly, use these tools to make the kinds of places you want to live in. Their cheers are not for me. They're for a future that didn't exist for some of them yesterday but might tomorrow. This is what I wanted when I started all of it, not to burn a name to the ground, but to make something new on the rubble. The revenge was never spectacle. It was structure, grants, training, real doors opening. I still wake up sometimes to a city that feels louder than it should. But when I look at these girls and at Mom, I know the trade was worth it. That's my story of how I took back my life. Have you ever had to fight for your truth? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video.